If you can make it to 30 episodes, you're in like the upper echelon. So everyone wants in. Most people don't want to commit to it. So if you're willing to commit to it as a part of your business, like it is not hard to kind of outrace the pack.
So you help Catholic business owners build and grow their podcasts. Why podcasts?
Well, a couple of reasons. One, just in a practical sense, it was what I did right out of college. I went into broadcast radio. I was an on-air host and a producer, and so I learned how to do it, and I figured I'd just stick with it. The other thing I think is it's a great medium, especially over these last few years. Really, just 2020 and beyond, podcasting has really taken off, and I think there's a reason for that. And probably, I think, two main reasons for it. One, the barrier to entry is fairly low. It used to be lower, certainly. Your barrier to quality entry is now higher than it used to be. People won't listen to a bad sounding podcast. But you can, for a couple $100, get a setup and just go. Like it is really simple. Two, I think, and the biggest thing, especially for business owners, people who run ministries, anyone running a business in like the loosest sense, it's a good medium to build trust, and it's sort of an efficient vehicle for your marketing. Like you sit down 30, 60, 90 minutes, however long you're recording for, and you've got at least 5 good clips out of it, 10 good clips out of it. So that's a third of your social media was just right there. And now you have to build out from it, but it's really good bang for your buck, especially if you're starting out and you only have, you're doing all the work, you only have so many hours. It's a really efficient use of your time, not only to build trust with your audience and sort of expand on some of the ideas behind your business or your offerings or what have you, but it's efficient for repurposing in your marketing as well. I think it's a high upside with a fairly low entry cost. I think it's, for a lot of people, I think it's a no-brainer at the center of their marketing.
There's a lot of different levels of podcast quality. What are
There
the
is.
So like on the lowest levels, like what are the kind of the highest impact, lowest investment wins?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Are you talking about in terms of like format or commitment, or in terms of like what you need to buy just to sound good enough to get by?
I was initially thinking of equipment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the bottom end of the gear spectrum, I guess, has gotten so good. Like, listeners who, were on YouTube in the year like 2013-ish will remember that the best thing you could get, like the highest tier creators had like that little snowball microphone, that funky little circular thing that sat on a tripod in your desk it sounds terrible. But that, a decade ago was the peak of audio, and it wasn't super cheap either to get that. Now, I mean, heck, you can go on Amazon or some of these even more, slightly more specialty, like B&H, I think it is. I think it's more photography.
Yeah.
And you can get a microphone, like a plug and play USB microphone for $100 that, you're not going to sound like NPR, but you'll sound perfectly good. You want to tweak it a little bit, EQ it just a touch to make it sound better. But right out of the box for $100, you can get a plug and play USB microphone and a subscription to something like we're using right now, like Riverside, which is pretty much industry standard for remote recordings. And that'll cost you, I don't know, $20 a month, give or take. And you're kind of good. Most people, if you've got you can use your phone as like your camera, plug it in, kind of set it up. If you're on an all Apple setup, iPhone, Mac, like it's immediate. If you're not, there's ways to kind of make that work too. But I tend to say for $500, you can get a really good looking and sounding podcast setup, just starting from nothing. Get yourself a pair of headphones, get a, half decent USB microphone, maybe some sound panels or some extra blankets on the floor or something like that. And you're off to the races. Like it is cheaper than it's ever been to get started. Now, the tough part there is it's also cheaper for everybody else to get started, right? So you have more competition, but the stats really prove you don't have to worry too much about that. Most podcasts die after a single digit amount of episodes, and the ones that don't make it 25, maybe, and they tend to die as well. So if you can make it to 30 episodes, you're in like the upper echelon. So everyone wants in. Most people don't want to commit to it. So if you're willing to commit to it as a part of your business, like it is not hard to kind of outrace the pack.
Gotcha. So what would you say is the best setup without getting to uh, like the Joe Rogan level? So if you're a solo guy, what's the best you can do?
Well, that's a good question. Let's think. What would I say? I tend to recommend Rode, which is a sort of legacy audio brand, has a USB mic, just the Rode USB pod mic. That thing's about $200. It's a little more expensive, but I'm always, if you can swing it over something that's about half the price, I'm always going to recommend that because I think it's super solid. It's plug and play. It comes with the software that if you don't want to mess with it too much, there are some like automatic filters isn't exactly the right word, but some automatic EQ presets that'll make you sound better that you can just turn on in the software and let it do its thing. That is probably the place to start. And then, depending on what your lighting setup is, maybe you get one of those little ring lights or something like that. Maybe two, just to make sure you don't have weird like Rembrandt shadows. But those things you can get for $30 a pop. They're not too bad. You can get some sound panels. Pack of 24 of them goes for $40, something like that on Amazon or some sort of comparable retailer. I would get some of those. For free, you can set up moving blankets, or for cheap, you can find them. I've used some moving blankets in my studio, like Facebook Marketplace and whatnot. You can get those for real cheap, and they do a really good job. Carpet, rugs, sofas, anything in your room, like how, like think about the last time you moved into a new place when it's completely empty and there's all this echo, and then you put your furniture in there and the echo goes away. It's the exact same concept. Like that's why it works. So if you have a full room, couches, chairs, rugs, things like that, that alone will help dampen your sound, cut down the reverb without you spending a penny on sound panels. And then, you get I'd say Riverside. Riverside costs you $20-25 a month. And beyond that, that's pretty much it. Now, if you want to get into a camera, that's where it gets a little expensive. I would say there's a couple of decent 4K webcams out there with the OBS bot. I think it is maybe $300. You could go something like that. What I tend to recommend often, if you're in the sort of Apple ecosystem already, if you've got an iPhone and a Mac, you can pair those as a continuity camera. Your iPhone just becomes your webcam, and it'll get you really good quality there. So if you don't have that, you're a little out of luck, and you got to spend some money on a webcam or commit to buying a camera. That's more expensive. I don't think most people need to do that, but if you want to, you certainly can. So yeah, it really is that simple. That Rode PodMic, maybe some sound panels, maybe a couple of lights if you don't have good natural lighting. And then, whatever you're recording in, StreamYard is free, OBS is free, Riverside is paid, but it is, pretty and user-friendly, and it'll offer you a decent amount of features. And you get those and you're good. Like you really are set. As long as I will recommend a pair of headphones. They don't really matter what they are, frankly, because it's just so you don't, it's just so whoever you're talking to, their voice doesn't get into your microphone and it creates feedback and it's a whole nightmare. You can get a set of those like little skull candy earbuds or something like that. I'd recommend getting something a little nicer, but the pair I've been using for years, cost me like $35. And that's more than enough for your average person. So it really is easy. Like it really is easy to do. The barrier to entry is super low. It's mostly just about your own mental commitment to it. That's the real differentiating factor.
Let me ask a few follow-up questions. So
Sure.
how would you compare the Rode PodMic with, I'm using the Rode Lapel mic.
Mhm.
What's the pros and cons of that?
Yeah. So a couple of things. Lapel mics, you might also hear them called like lavalier mics.
Yeah.
They're okay. They're cheap, which is their biggest perk. But a couple of things. One, your probably biggest knock on that is microphones, like proper, like a Rode Pod mic or something like that, has what we call off-axis rejection. And all that means is you speak into the microphone directly, and things that come from, behind the microphone and the side to the microphone that aren't right in front of it, like it's pretty good at rejecting that noise so it doesn't get picked up. That's what off-axis rejection means. It's just literally off the axis that you're speaking into. All that other stuff gets dampened or completely doesn't make it into the recording. That's probably the biggest knock. Is lapel mics tend not to do that particularly well, because that's not really their point. Like their point tends to be field recording, reporting, journalism, things like that. Like they do pretty well there. When I was a journalist, that was kind of part of our setup. It was pretty common to have that on your person. I know there's this hilarious thing that doesn't make any sense to me on like TikTok and Instagram Reels and things like that. People will hold these lav mics and like interview.
Goofy.
It looks so stupid, and it's just not how they're supposed to be used. Yeah. I mean, it sounds okay. I think that is just an aesthetic, and I'm if you want to do it, that's fine. It looks silly. It's not really the use for it, but it is kind of an aesthetic. So like I get it, and it's becoming sort of a self-aware, like those little tiny microphones that look like genuinely just tiny microphones, not like a lapel mic, which I think they terrible sound quality on them, but they are really funny. I do get a kick out of them. But yeah, your biggest knock on something like that is podcasting is just not really its strong suit. If you wanted to go out and put Dead Cat on it or something like that, a Dead Cat being that little fuzzy filter, it looks like a cat is why it's called that. That's great for getting rid of wind noise. You want to use it for something like that out in the field, maybe. But yeah, your biggest knock is it's just not going to do the job nearly as well. Now, I will say this: what I tell people a lot is your podcast doesn't have to sound great. It just has to sound good. It just has to sound good enough that you don't get in your own way. That's it. At some point, you're spending thousands of dollars to sound 2% better. And now if you're at the highest level and that really does matter to you, sure, do it. But if you're not in that 1%, like don't bother. Get a good setup that makes you sound good and then don't worry about it. Like you're going to be spending way too much to get results that ultimately do not matter, because the end limiting factor is you're going to be heard through a car stereo. You're going to be heard through AirPods. AirPods have terrible audio quality. I know people love them. I know this is a controversial take. They're terrible. I own a pair because they're convenient, but like they're not good. The limiting factor is the end user and how they hear you. So it really doesn't matter if you sound incredible if you're coming through, the speakers of my like 2012 Subaru Outback. It sounds fine, but I can't tell the difference. It's the end user that limits it. So I tell people not to get too worried about their setup. Just get something good. Get something that does the job. Like a proper microphone is made for this job. But beyond that, it really doesn't matter.
So I think you're saying that type of microphone that you're recommending, I think they might call it a directional mic sometimes. Mm-hmm. So it only picks up if you're speaking at it. So you have to have it pointed at your mouth. But pretty much, you're doing that, it's not going to get the other sounds in the room.
Yeah, exactly. So lav mics, not always, but are often what we call omnidirectional mics, as in it will pick up sound anywhere that comes, omnidirectional from all around. It comes in, like, because again, it's for a different purpose. Unidirectional mics, like the one I'm using right now, which is a fancy one that no one needs. Even I don't need it, but I really like it. It'll have a different called. I'm sure everyone is tuned out by this point, but there are these things called polar patterns that basically determine where the sound can come from and what it will pick up. So the most common one is a cardioid pattern. It's cardioid because it's shaped like a heart. So things directly in front of the mic and slightly off to the side, they'll all make it, and everything beyond that doesn't. If you buy a pretty basic plug and play mic, that's usually what you're working with. And so if you speak, if you kind of speak to the side, like it'll sound odd, but once you get up in front of it, it'll sound correct. But yeah, so that is probably the biggest difference of you really don't want to use an omnidirectional mic for podcasting. It's just, it's unless you're in a completely treated room. And if you spent that much money to treat your room, there's no reason you should be spending, $25 to get a lav mic. Like you're all in at that point. So it's, it's just not the right use case ultimately.
Yeah. So what do you recommend in terms of the different softwares? Because I mean, some of them that come to mind, you've already mentioned Riverside, but then you got Descript is one of them.
Mhm.
You have there's a couple other ones for either cleaning up the audio or
Yeah.
being able to publish it or being able to transfer it to social media. Do you have any recommendations there?
Yeah, I think Riverside is good. When I record, Kolbe Studios has an in-house podcast that is currently on a summer break. But when we record, we use Riverside. It's
Mhm.
simple, it's user friendly. The sort of magic clips, the AI that grabs clips and suggests them is pretty good. I've used a bunch. It's not perfect. No AI program is perfect, and they never will be. But it is pretty good. Um, there are other ones out there I've used. What is it? Squadcast, which is owned by Descript. It's in that same software. That one works fine. I like it well enough. I've used Zencaster. That one works fine. I like it well enough. But I recommend Riverside. It's just user friendly. It's convenient. It's simple, and it's got some built-in AI editing that can help you make your podcast sound a little great or a little better rather. I will say it's not great. I've I've used it a bit to play around with it. It's not fantastic, and if you know a little bit about audio editing, you can make it sound better. It's, uh it's real hit or miss, and I wouldn't rely on it. I would definitely take the time to learn how to, to edit the podcast yourself, at least the basics. You don't have to get way into it, but at least the basics of if I have a guest, I want their track and my track to be at the same volume because, if you've ever heard a podcast where, the host is much louder or much quieter than the guest and you're turning it up, turning it down, it's infuriating. Like you want to make sure that they're at the same level. And, you want to take some time to get rid of mouth clicks and things like that, like over the top ones. And you want to get rid of some background noise if you can. That's pretty much it. You can do that in some AI editors. I'd recommend, I love Adobe Audition. It's, the Adobe suite is expensive. If you're a hobbyist, I don't know if you really want to spend the like $30 a month or so just to get that one program. If you're already in the Adobe suite and you have other ones, yeah, I think it's worth it. Audacity is something people like. Audacity is free. It's open source. It looks like it's still from 2002, so it's not very beautiful, and the learning curve is kind of steep because it's not super intuitive, but it is free, and there are tons of YouTube videos out there. People have been using Audacity for years at this point. We had back I my first job out of college was at KNOM Radio and a small radio station in Alaska, and we had a guy who recorded we were out west, out in rural Alaska, and he was in Anchorage, in the city, and he would record his remotely. And this guy who's a sound engineer, for 40 plus years, he used Audacity. It's a really basic program and he used it. So I always say like, if that guy can use it, like you can too. If you want to get serious about it and you want to do podcast versus radio, because there is a difference in quality and whatnot, I'd recommend learning an editor, but you can get away with Audacity if you're committed to learning it and getting past that learning curve. Yeah, you can do just fine. You don't have to spend any money on it. But yeah, and you could record into OBS or StreamYard. I think those are both free, or they have a free tier. So you can do it on basically $0. But if you're serious about it, I'd recommend setting aside $50 a month or so and getting Riverside, probably getting Audition and trying to learn that.
What do you think about Cast Magic and Buzzsprout?
I like Buzzsprout. I use Buzzsprout. I'm a big fan of it. I recommend Buzzsprout pretty much universally in terms of, listeners, if you're not familiar, Buzzsprout being an uploader for like a software that uploads your podcast to all major platforms for you so you don't have to do it automatically or individually rather. That one's good. I use it. I like it. Fireside.fm is another one I recommend. That's a little more work. It's a little clunkier. It's kind of like Audacity. It's older. It's a little less user friendly, but it has a lot of neat features and some good programs in there that if you're willing to go with the learning curve is also solid. I pretty much always recommend either Buzzsprout or Fireside. I don't think there's really any reason to go with anything else unless you're trying to save money. In that case, RSS.com, I think, is free, as is Spotify for podcasters, and you can upload, or Spotify for creators now, I think it's called. And you can upload to that Spotify for creators and also have it sent to Apple Podcasts. And I don't think that costs you anything. Again, it's a little more work. For me, I do this professionally. It makes sense for me to pay for it and, have it done for me just for the convenience. But, if you're trying to do a podcast just for kicks on a budget, something like that, yeah, RSS.com or Spotify for creators, yeah, you can save some money that way. But I like Buzzsprout. I'm a big believer.
Any familiarity with Cast Magic?
No, I have not used that one. What is that? Is that an uploader like Buzzsprout, or does it do something else? Is it a recorder?
I think it's more for like editing and then posting. In terms of, I think you can do some audio cleaning in it, but then also they'll help you get the transcript out of it, and then if you want to turn it into a blog post, or if you want to make some cut it for social media, they'll I guess more sophisticated AI tools.
That makes sense. I've used a couple. I haven't used that one, so I can't speak to it. I would say, though, if you're using Riverside already to record, Riverside has all those tools built in. You can get a transcript. You can get AI suggested like magic clips, things like that. And it's pretty good. I've used a number of different transcript tools. Riverside's, for being at no extra charge, is a pretty good value. I really like it. I recommend it. So it's one of those things of, if you're already paying for it, like, I don't think there's AI tools out there that are significantly better, that are worth extra money, unless you're really committed. And if you really want to get into it, sure, I'd say that there are some others you can look into, but Riverside already has it, and it's pretty good. So I'd just keep it all under one roof.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that in terms of cleaning sound, you have on the one hand Audacity, on the other Adobe. What was the Adobe one again?
Adobe Audition. There are other ones out there. That's the one I use. Mm-hmm.
Is there something in the middle where that it's more simple to use than Audacity, but it's not as sophisticated as Audition?
That depends on who you ask. I think I would say no. I would say that Audition, Adobe Audition is kind of the middle ground. There's something out there called Logic Pro Tools that people use. Some people swear by it. I don't like it. I don't use it, but that's only because I learned Audition first, and I'm so used to the Adobe suite after years of doing it. Some would make a case that something like Pro Tools is maybe a little simpler, or even at least better. I would say that Adobe Audition is actually that mid ground between Audacity, which is free, and Pro Tools, which, the big thing about Logic Pro Tools is you can buy it outright. I think it's a few $100 and you own it, instead of, the eternal hamster wheel that we're on with software as a service, where I just pay Audition each month and they give me a slightly different product each year and pretend like it's worth it. It's not, but I'm just so used to it that they have my soul. It is what it is. I've accepted it. Maybe I should learn Logic. But yeah, I really think that Audition is probably that middle ground. And in that same vein, there are tons of YouTube videos out there on Audition. Like, if you want to learn something even real specific, Mike Russell, I believe his name is, musicradiocreative.com, I think is his thing. He's on YouTube. He is one of those dudes out there who's like the Audition guru. He has tons of videos dating back years on just all things Audition. So if you want to get into that, there's a lot of resources out there. Like, I wouldn't let the barrier to entry scare you, because it will be difficult at first, but there are so many videos out there. There are so many resources and blog posts and things like that you really can teach yourself. It's more of, hey, do I want to commit this time to do it? Like, that's the question you have to ask, more than, as opposed to rather, can I do it? You can. You definitely can. It's just whether you think the time to learn it is more valuable to you than paying somebody else to do it, or trying to figure out which AI can do it most passively. That's really the question I think you should ask.
For more of an aesthetical question, so Sean Ryan has a preference of not showing equipment in the shots, which I like that. I don't know if it's possible when you're interviewing people remotely on a podcast. What's your take on that?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So it is possible. Well, if you're interviewing people remotely, it is possible, at least for you, to the tough indicator. The tough part there is their setup. Who knows what they have? So I'm a radio guy first and foremost. So I actually really like the aesthetic of the microphone in the shot. And also it's cheaper, because almost universally, to get the microphone out of the shot means you have to have a boom mic And those are expensive. And also the boom isn't cheap either to get it. You know, it's like, it's why you don't see microphones in movies. You know, they've got the boom mic up overhead, picking it up, and they're very fancy Sennheiser that cost them thousands of dollars. I don't think it's worth it. And also I like the aesthetic. But, you know, if you want that aesthetic, you can definitely get it, but you're going to have to pay for it, and it's going to be more expensive.
You can't just use the Rode PodMic and just put it out of the shot, because it's got to be up against your mouth.
It's you want something like that within 6 inches of your mouth, give or take, maybe 4, maybe 8, but 6 inches I think is a pretty reasonable thing. So yeah, if you keep it out of the shot, unless you have a crazy tight shot that's just like right in your face, and sure, yeah, then the microphone won't be in the shot, but your face will take up the whole screen, and I don't really think that's the trade-off you want. Yeah, so it's just not possible to do it with that type of microphone. There are mics made for that specific use case. The Sennheiser MK something. This isn't really my field. This is more videography. But you know, there's a Sennheiser MK something that's like the sort of gold standard for that, and you know that's thousands of dollars. So if you want the aesthetic, you can get it, but it is more work and way more money than just getting a $500 microphone and keeping it in shot.
Now, what's the deal with this thing where you can hear your own voice as you're talking? It's like self-monitor or something like that.
Yeah, I don't really know why people do that in podcasts. That's a radio thing, like first and foremost, because you can kind of monitor your levels, make sure you don't sound too loud or too quiet, because you get immediate feedback, or if something's wrong, you can hear it and fix it on the fly. In podcasting, I mean, you can fix it in post. You're not live. I don't really see. Some people just like it. Some people like that immediate feedback because they know they're not going too loud, too soft. They're not going to make their editor's life hard, I guess. Yeah, I think that's purely a personal choice. I don't think there's a lot of utility to it. You know, don't yell at me. Maybe I'm wrong. You know, don't email me. But I don't really think there's a lot of utility to it. But if it makes you feel more comfortable and you feel, some people I think are worried that like, oh man, what if I'm not getting this? It sounds really bad and I'm going to be, you know, 75 minutes down the line and then realize something was wrong. It can give you some peace of mind. And I think there's value to that. But other than that, I don't really see a need for it.
You don't use it personally?
I don't personally, no. And I mean, I used it in radio because I really liked it in radio. But yeah, for podcasting, I mean, I don't. But also, I run a backup recording, so I can actually just look at the recording file. And I mean, at this point, I can just look at the waveform and go, oh yeah, everything's fine. But, you know, I've been doing this for a while. So if you don't feel comfortable doing that, yeah, there might be some utility.
I'd love to hear a little bit more of the kind of business owners you work with, what successes look like for you, what drives you to do it. Probably should have started with that question, actually.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's exactly an archetypal business owner that we work with. The through line tends to be people who already have an offering to sell. And I mean that in a very liberal sense. You don't have to necessarily be selling a product or a service specifically. Like you can be selling anything, an ebook, a course, a physical product, you know, a community membership. Like it doesn't really matter. If you have an offer to offer, that tends to be the through line, because podcasting is a difficult medium to monetize out of the gate. Unless you already have name recognition for something else and you start a podcast, it's pretty hard to get, you know, listeners. It's pretty hard to make money off of the podcast in the form of advertisements and sponsors and the things you think of when you think of monetizing a podcast. If, however, you take it and you use it as a vehicle to build trust, get people in, and then go at the end, hey, you know, also I offer this, and that may not even be something sold. That may be like a lead magnet. Let's just for example, we're helping a couple of ladies who work in like spiritual direction and things like that, in kind of that field. We're helping them build a podcast right now, and their general plan is, okay, let's get listeners in. One of the hosts already has an ebook, and I'm like, let's just give away the ebook for free, or pay what you want, or $9.99, something like that, like some low barrier to entry thing. and you want to use the podcast either to sell things directly, to get sponsors, which is the least likely and most difficult, or to get people to click on a lead magnet and get them into your ecosystem, whatever that looks like. Business owners and people just in general, solo creators, ministry owners, whatever, who have an offer, who already have something of value to give, or already have a lead magnet set up and they've got their campaign, those are the ones that are going to do the best, because those, or people who have tons of money to spend and don't mind waiting a couple years to monetize the podcast. If you have cash, that works too. You can wait it out. But for most people, having an offer is the best indicator that you can be successful with your podcast, because the podcast itself doesn't need to make money in your eyes. It is just a vehicle that moves people to the lead magnet, gets them into the funnel, gets them into the course, the community, gets them to buy your product, whatever it is. That's the best indicator of success. Business owners, ministry owners, whomever, who come in with an offer and a plan and patience, those are the people we tend to see the best success with, because, just like in all business, right? You need a certain amount of patience and, a certain amount of courage and tenacity as well, just to make it. But patience is a really big thing to go, all right, I haven't made any money on this business yet. I'm still in the red, but I'm not panicking because I'm still going according to plan. I know this is going to take me 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is. It's the same thing here. I know it's going to take me time to build up, but once I can get people at the top of that funnel and working down, I know I'm going to close some of them and the podcast pays for itself. So people in that, people in that mindset, I suppose, or people in that level of preparedness, they tend to be the ones who do the best. That's pretty much universally, not even just with us, just in general. I mean, it is the way that the medium works, or at least it's the way that it works best if you need shorter term success. And by shorter term, I mean probably less than 18 months.
Why do you think the podcast is the best way to do that?
I think there's a couple of reasons. I think one, it's a format people are comfortable with. It's a format they understand. It's a growing format. I think just the format itself is clearly proven to work. I mean, the 2024 presidential campaign was won and lost on podcasts. That's wild. You had the woman who did not make it, but almost made it, and the guy who won, both doing podcasts, doing high profile podcasts. Even in 2020, I mean, that wasn't a thing. In 2016, it wasn't even considered. The medium is taking off because people go, all right, look, I don't really trust the sort of shorter form. By shorter form, I mean half an hour news cycle, because, I can only spend 3 or 4 minutes on a segment because there's an ad break coming up. In a podcast, you can spend 2 hours on it. You can really dive into these things. So people trust the format, I think, inherently more than any other medium. I think that helps a ton. And two, it really just, think about just friendship in general. You meet somebody, you get along well enough, and as you spend more time together, you start to trust them more, you start to have a better relationship. The same concept works. If you spend hours listening to somebody, you're just going to have a more positive opinion of them. It's just how the human brain works. You really do eventually grow to trust people, especially if you relate to them and the host can kind of make you feel not make you feel that sounds duplicitous. If the host really does care and does relate to you because they're in a similar state of life or something like that, you're just going to trust them. I think it is the most human and also humane media form out there that people can access on their own time, and they can access in their niche of interest, and they can find people they relate to and ultimately trust. And that is the formula. You have to. Everyone wants to do business with their friends. Most of our friends work for corporations, so we can't do business directly with them. The next best thing is I want to do business with people who I feel understand my situation, who I trust, who I feel we have similar values. And this is a great way to prove to potential customers, potential clients, whomever, that you do share similar values. You do understand their struggles. You do, to some degree, go through life in the same way they do. And that, that is a recipe for trust and, ultimately success in whatever you're trying to do with your podcast.
Maybe we can do a little bit of laser coaching here. So you mentioned, having the best format is if you have like a funnel to guide people along.
Generally, yeah.
So in my situation, I'm not trying to pitch any product. I'm doing the podcast to be able to network with interesting people like you, to get inspiration, to get encouragement, to inspire other people, to speak the truth and to do the good and to protect the beautiful. And I'm hoping that kind of serendipitous opportunities will arise as a result of this. I do like public speaking. I'm hoping that I'll have public speaking opportunities through this, but I don't have like a particular product or pitch. So am I wasting my time?
Yep. Yeah, you are. No, I don't think so. I really don't, because you seem to understand what your point is. And it's for most, why I say the things I do is because for most people that makes sense. It's not universal though. Like in your scenario, you still have I would argue you still have a funnel to a degree. The funnel just looks something like initial connection with an interesting person on a podcast. And, from there, serendipity. Like it's not a very robust funnel, I think, but you are just kind of, I think the top of your funnel, quote unquote, is really wide because you can get a lot of people in, you can meet people, they know people. I don't think for what you're doing, you have to go, all right, well, they bought my ebook and now I have their email. Now they're on the newsletter. I know the newsletter converts every time I put a product in the 3% rate. And so I can just do the math and figure it out. Like you're not working that way. You are using it as a networking vehicle that will later on down the line open opportunities. I think that's great. We get clients in just because I've talked to people who know me as the guy who does podcasts and they don't really know somebody else who does podcasts. And so if somebody comes up to them and goes, hey, I need help with my podcast, or I want to start one, I'm just the guy because I'm the one they know because I've met them. I think your scenario is actually pretty similar. Whatever, it depends on what you're offering, whether it's public speaking or if you've got a different long-term goal with this. But the more people and I think this is a great format for building trust, not just with your audience, but with your guests, building a rapport, expanding your network. I think this works. I think this is a format where you want to build trust, not just with your audience as some person of high moral character and of, knowledge, but also build rapport with your guests such that when they have a need that you might fill, it's you versus, however under many people, do what you do. How many of them have also had an hour-long conversation with, how many of them have had an hour-long conversation with whomever this person is that needs your services? Probably none of them. I think this sets you up well. All of us are in, to some degree, the business of trust and the business of customer service. So if you build a good rapport, you help your guests have a good experience on your show, and you also promote it after the fact, and they get some traffic to their website, their podcast, whatever it may be, and you prove some reciprocity. Yeah, I think this is a format that works for what you're doing. Now, this is a surface level guess. Of course, we don't have hours to dive into this, but that is at least my initial sense. I think what you're doing makes sense.
I'm extremely impressed with your thoughtfulness and clear speaking. I don't think you've used a filler word this whole time, and you've spoken in complete sentences. That's very rare.
Nobody run this back. Nobody fact check him. I'm sure I got. That's very kind. I appreciate that. My mother read to me very often and was very big into diction and all that. And at the time, I didn't get it, but it might have worked out. I'll never show her this. I can't tell her that she was right. I got to keep that under wraps.
So what advice do you have for me? What should I be doing differently? I want you to tear down my approach in a scathing critique.
Great. Oh, man. Well, let me ask you a couple of clarifying questions before we start. You tell me a little bit more about what you're trying to do. I know you mentioned public speaking down the line, and I think a podcast is a great resume for public speaking. I think it puts you ahead of people. But beyond just setting yourself up for gigs, are there other things that you're trying to do with this?
I put a lot of thought into this. Initially, I was spraying myself very thin, thinking about different hustles to go down. Most recently, the one that I'm actually most excited about is helping young parents in their crucial mission.
Mm-hmm.
They feel isolated, alone, overwhelmed, helping connect them with other values-aligned parents for mutual support. Maybe
Sure.
through an app where, hey, you commit to, when you're on this app, you commit to helping the other people on this app who live within 30 minutes of you to babysit their kid when they need to go on a date night, or just social support. Anyways, but as excited as I am about that, I just don't think I have time for another hustle.
Sure.
So I enjoy doing the podcast. I enjoy meeting interesting people. I think it's an investment that will pay off, though I don't see how specifically. Ultimately, what I want to do is be paid to read and talk to interesting people.
What's your current business right now?
I'm a psychologist.
Okay.
So Values First Therapy, I provide modern psychology with traditional family values, specializing in OCD, scrupulosity.
Okay. Would you say that to any degree, the goal of this podcast is to get new clients for your practice?
Not really, because it's just so hard to scale this type of therapy practice. Sure. Because it's so hard to find. I'm the only therapist, and it's very, very hard to find competent, values-aligned therapists.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Well, that helps because and I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. There's no reason you have to have your podcast directly work for your business, or your main business. You can absolutely build a second thing. I mean, look, I love the idea, what you talked about earlier, of young parents needing support, finding each other. It's a shame you don't have the time to build out something like that, because I think it's a great idea. I think there's a great need for it.
I'm looking for someone else who will do it. So if you know anyone,
I'll keep my eyes open. I'll see if I know somebody. Go
long-term vision. Let me just throw this out. Long-term vision is forming virtuous communities.
Okay.
I'd love to do this. So the leader is crucial for the overall of the community. And this podcast is more speaking to those leaders. Now so you got the leader, and then you got on the smaller cell of society, the family. So sure. if I can help both those people, but the podcast specifically is for the target towards the leaders.
Mm-hmm. I think your best bet then is, I'd say two things. One, I would make sure that all your guests, and I've looked through some of your most recent ones, but I haven't dove into your back catalog. So if some of this is incorrect, no worries. I would say making sure that your guests align with your mission. It's really easy, especially on guest-driven podcasts, to go, well, I need an episode this week. I need somebody. I'll take somebody who comes along. And I mean, I've been there. I get it. It's a temptation for sure, because I would rather have an episode that doesn't really fit than not put up anything. I don't know if that's actually true, but that's at least the thought process. I'd be very intentional about picking your guests. I would, if you haven't already, concretize the mission of what you're doing. I'd write it down, be like, this is, and maybe you already have, this podcast exists to meet and share the stories of virtuous leaders who inspire the general populace to be better men and women of business, better parents, better Catholics, Christians, something like that. Again, this is all off the top of my head, but something like that. If you haven't already done that, I would definitely do that. I think it really helps to just go, I have this Magna Carta that explains my podcast. Anytime I have a decision to make, I can just look at it. I can go, does this fit what I do? If yes, do it. If no, get rid of it. And it's that simple. It certainly makes it easier. because as you go down the line, it's really easy to feel like, oh man, I've said everything, I've met everybody, like how do I continue? Maybe I branch out. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that as long as it fits the mission. But if you don't have it really genuinely physically written down even, that can make it tough. So I'd start there. And then once you work from there, everything gets easier. You go, I've got this potential guest. Does this guest fit this? Yes, great, book them. If not, just, politely move on. I think that's step one. Two is, and something people who are doing this for themselves struggle with is distribution. And I suppose by distribution more so I mean marketing. Making sure that people actually know you're doing this. Short form clips can be great. AI can definitely help with that, especially if you don't have the time to do it yourself or the money to pay somebody else to do it. Just grabbing those Riverside Magic clips, editing you can edit one of those in 5 minutes and it's ready to go. I would commit to probably posting a few of those a week if you're not already doing that. I think that's a good way to do it. I would also encourage you to learn some of the basics of audio editing beyond what you're getting in kind of the Riverside suite. It's easy to take your podcast from like a 3 to a 6. It's tougher to take from a 6 to a 10, but it's really easy to just learn a few things, make a few adjustments, and make your podcast sound better.
80,
It'll
20.
take you a couple hours. Yeah, it is exactly that. Yeah, it's the 80-20. So I think those are probably your biggest things. I would definitely, because I've listened through, and I have a more discerning ear because I'm paid to. I don't know how your average listener hears it. Maybe it doesn't bother them. There's definitely a few tweaks I would make. I'd remove some background noise. I'd match some of those. I'd match some of those volumes just to make sure host and guest sound about the same. And that alone really will do a lot of good. I think that's really all you need when it comes to editing. I mean, you could get more into it if you wanted to, but those two things alone, I think will do you a lot of good. And I'd commit to posting a few clips a week. You can definitely get 15 to 20 clips out of, with the Riverside's Magic Editor, you can get those clips out of it, and it's pretty easy. I wouldn't use all of them, but a few a week. And I think that's plenty. And then what I like to do is, or I like to recommend is take those and then you can build posts out of them. You can build text posts out of them for LinkedIn or Twitter or a Facebook group or something like that. You've already done this stuff. Just expand it a little bit. Expand it into a blog, expand it into a social media post, 280 characters top, something simple, or maybe a little longer for LinkedIn. It's a better format for that. Maybe make a short blog post. I would put blog posts at your bottom priority. I really don't think, unless you see good success with people coming onto your website and reading your blog posts and converting that way. If that's the case, then I would say commit to it. If not, I really wouldn't worry about it. People don't discover podcasts via SEO. People in the industry disagree with me. I really don't think SEO is a big deal for podcasts. It's something I'd consider, but I think it's bottom of the barrel. Incentivizing people to tell their friends about your podcast. I mean, that's the biggest way to go. That and being a guest on other podcasts. I think those are probably your two best ways of trying to expand, as opposed to SEO and organic search and paid ads, things like that. I wouldn't fuss about all that. I think as long as people just need to know you exist, you need to sound decent and people need to know you exist. That is pretty much it. As just fundamental philosophies, those two things, if you just tattoo it on your forehead, people need to know that my podcast exists and I need to ask them to give me reviews and tell their friends about me. That's pretty much it. Just do those things, and those are your principles of people need to know you exist and they need to tell more people you exist, and you got to sound decent. That's all there is to it at a fundamental level. And then you just keep doing, sort of Alex Hormozy, find the thing that works and just do it over and over and over again. It's not sexy. It's not super enjoyable, but it works. Whatever works, just keep doing that over and over again and commit to doing that for 12 months. You'll be fine. It really is that simple. It's just, this is certainly him saying it, not me. He's said it much more than I have. People just don't do that. It's actually not hard to succeed. To some degree, yes, it is, but most people just give up too early. It's not about having the right idea or the perfect strategy. It's just about going, this thing is good. It works. I'm going to do it over and over again. And if I do this, 100 times a week, if I make 100 calls a week, if I make 15 social media posts a week and I do this for a year, it is unreasonable to think I won't grow and that I will not be more successful. Just do that. It really is that simple. It's just difficult. It's not complicated. It's just difficult.
How do I guest on other people's podcasts?
Couple ways. I can't vouch for them because I've never used them, but I am aware of them and I've heard good things. This is my disclaimer. There's a software out there called PodMatch. You can go on there. It's a paid amount. I think it's reasonably nominal. You can be a guest on other people's podcasts, as well as find guests for your podcast. Alex something, I think, is the guy who runs. Anyway, it's called PodMatch. That's a pretty decent one. And then honestly, what I would do is just, what podcast do you listen to? Are they in a similar vein to you? Email them, DM them on Instagram, do whatever you got to do. Just go, hey, can I come on the show? And then they go, no, you can't. Or yes, you can, but it's going to be a few months. Or yes, absolutely. How's 2 weeks from now? You just, again, it's kind of like cold calling. It's just, how many times can I pick up the phone before it's unreasonable to think that no one will say yes? If you send out 50 requests to be on a podcast, I think it's unreasonable to say you wouldn't get one or two. It really is kind of a numbers game. Now, you want to make sure they're value-aligned podcasts and you want to be respectful and whatnot, but I would say warm outreach is probably your best bet. Find them on LinkedIn, find them on Instagram if you're on there, hit them up in one way or another, go to their website, fill out a contact form. Sometimes that can work. Or PodMatch. And probably a combination of both, I think, is good. Now, if you're looking for specifically Catholic podcasts, PodMatch may not be as good. But if you're open to more broadly Christian or values-aligned secular, things like that, because there's plenty of the psychology space. If you're open to a little broader, you might have a bit of better luck on there. But if you're looking to be in that niche, and it's perfectly fine if you are. In some ways, it's beneficial. You may not find it's worth your time, but I'd consider getting on there for a month. I think it'll cost you $20, $30 to just try it out for a month. That's probably a good bet to make, even if it doesn't work out. You've probably met a couple people and you're not out much money. Do those two things, and that's kind of it. It really is. Again, it's not complicated. It's just difficult, as with most things that are worth anything.
Speaking of a numbers game, right now I'm shooting for 3 episodes a week. I like doing it, honestly. It's the highlight of my work week.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't mind bumping it up to 5 a week. Is that crazy?
It's an interesting strategy. Well, it depends. If I didn't know anything about you, I would say yes. I would say that is too many episodes a week. But it depends on the rate of success you're having. Like, if you have the data to go, this is actually good for me. More episodes is better. It means more listeners, it means I'm getting a higher rate of consistent listeners. I have a higher rate of subscribers, things like that. If you have the data to show that more than 3 episodes a week is good and more would be better, then I would say do it. Other than that, I would say probably no. People are kind of used to 1 episode a week. What you could do is, and now I'm saying this with no knowledge of your listener demographics or how well you're doing. What you could consider is paywalling one of your episodes a week. Say, I've got 1 regular and 1 paid. That's it's a very standard strategy. Plenty of people do that. Now you need the numbers to back it up. You need the subscribers to back it up, because if I go on your podcast and I go, oh, I think I'm going to get a bump from this, but you've paywalled me and nobody pays to be beyond it, that's going to be tough for me. So what you could do to mitigate that is paywall a certain aspect of the episode. Like, hey, the regular episode is done. Now we're going to do Patreon Q&A or something like that with, special guest Joe Coleman of Kolbe Studios. We're going to get into the deep dive of what gear you need for your podcast. It's behind the paywall. Anyone paying $5 a month or more on Patreon gets it. Something like that. You could consider that. But I think you are at a point where you probably don't need more than 3 episodes. And if you're going to add more, I would find a way to paywall some of them, I think. Now, if you've got 4 listeners, it's probably just not worth your time at all. But if you're starting to build up a decent listener base, even a small one, even a small but committed listener base, and you want to make a little money off of it, you might be able to. I'm certainly not saying you can't, but generally less is more when it comes to podcasts, unless you're trying to do 2, maybe tops 3 a week, and they're slightly varied, and they're also on YouTube. Maybe you can get some out of that. I know, I don't know if you've had him on, Nathan Crankfield of the Seeking Excellence podcast. You should have him on, a really interesting guy. He does like 3 episodes a week, but what he does is he has a standard podcast episode. He's got a YouTube first shorter episode that, it is a podcast, but it goes up on YouTube and it is more video oriented, and has a third sort of current events roundup, rapid fire, 20 minutes maybe with a co-host. So he does 3 a week, but they're all different. If you do 3 of the same thing a week, my worry, especially 5, my worry is you lose some of your luster. It's a little less exciting when you upload. You at some point may run out of guests if you want to do 5 a week, honestly. Unless you've got an infinite Rolodex of guests, I think you're better off staying at 3 max and just going, hey, I'm booked a few months out. I don't have to stress about this. I'm just going to let it roll. Again, I only know so much about you and what you're doing, but that's my sense. You have to be in a really specific position to want to be uploading 3 times a week, let alone 5.
Yeah, I'm crazy. So
now, if it's just for fun, if you just find enjoyment,
yeah,
and you go, well, Joe, I want to make some money off of this, but this is just fulfilling to me, then yeah, do more if you want to. I don't think it's necessarily the best business strategy, but if you find fulfillment in it, sure, why not? Yeah, do it.
Part of the reason is because part of the reason of the podcast is networking.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But then I had this other guy on, John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneurs on Fire. He does a daily episode. He's been doing a daily episode for like 20 years or something like that. His 4,000th episode. So he swears by it, man. He's like, you have to do it.
I think it depends on who you are and what your goal is. Now, I don't know anything about him. I don't know what kind of podcast he's running. There are, I know, for example, like we just sent out a proposal to a business manager at a diocese who has a priest at the diocesan cathedral who runs a daily podcast, but it's his homily, and it's a 15-minute reflection, maybe 10, 15-minute reflection. You can rep those out daily, and I think there's value to that. Anything beyond that, hey, he's found success, good for him. I think he's probably a unique case, or he's doing really short episodes each day. And those are for some people. I'm not a big fan of short episodes personally, not like as a professional, just like as a consumer of podcasts. Yeah. I'm not big into them, but I know some people are. So, it really is ultimately all about knowing your audience. The more data you can get from them, and this is why things like Patreon are good, or, Locals or Red Circle. I think Red Circle is the community, or just Circle, whatever it is. Any of those things, like if you can, even a Facebook group, just something you don't have to pay for. Getting data from your listeners is really useful because the people who will respond are your biggest fans, and ultimately they are the only ones that matter. This sounds callous, but like, you want to make all your decisions based on your top 10% of fans. The rest of them, they're great, but they're going to come and go, so they don't matter nearly as much as your avid listeners. They're the people you want to keep happy, because when you do a Patreon, they're the ones who are going to pay you. And they're the ones who support your work and are most, like, just maximally likely to organically tell their friends, like, hey, Johan has this great podcast. He interviews interesting, thought leaders and, virtuous people, and offers tangible ways to become a better person, better parent, whatever. Like, those are the people that are going to do that. So if you can get into their head in any way, even if you don't make money off of it, even if it's a free Facebook group, that data is worth a ton. And it also helps them build a little more reciprocity with you, feel like they're, part of the community. So it's a nice bonus there. But yeah, that data is great if you can get it.
That's a really good point. One thing that comes to my mind as you're speaking is maybe I do one episode with a bigger guest, longer form once a week, and then the other ones could be shorter ones. So people can decide themselves how many they want to listen to.
Yeah, I think that's definitely probably a better way to do it. I think variability is certainly the key if you're going to upload multiple times a week. Each episode has to be different in, kind or quantity or something like that. There has to be some variation as opposed to it's just 3, 60-minute interviews or what have you per week. I don't really think that would work. But if it's, hey, it's Wednesday, it's the 90-minute interview with a larger name, or it's Friday, it's this like end of week fun 25-minute coffee chat sort of thing, whatever it is. If you have that variability, I think that can work pretty well. But also to your previous point about networking, which I think is great. I think it's a really good way to use a podcast for what you're doing. You network while recording. You don't really network during the upload, at least not in the same way. So it doesn't matter if you bump their upload 4 to 6 weeks. We're networking right now. Even if this episode doesn't go up until August, like we've already made the connection. Like you've kind of already gotten what you want out of this. You're already set. So I wouldn't fuss too much about the upload as long as, you want to be respectful. You want to at least get it up in a reasonably timely manner, even if that's 4 to 6 weeks, as long as, your guest kind of knows what to expect. But this is the thing that like right now that is most important to you, not so much the upload. That is important on the back end and it is good, but it's good for getting subscribers, sponsors, leads, people to buy your course, whatever you're doing. The upload is for them. What's happening in the call is your point for networking with your guest. So I would think about it as 2 entirely different functions. This is so when I know of somebody in your area who is struggling with scrupulosity or something like that, I go, hey, I know a guy down there. Like, let me get you in contact. The upload is for people to listen and hopefully be, inspired or educated or entertained or, probably in an ideal world, some combination of the 3, and then subscribe and get on your Patreon or what have you. So I think they're really 2 just completely different things under the same roof.
Do you have any last words for us, and how can people follow you?
Yeah, stkolbestudios.com, all spelled out, SAINT, kolbestudios.com is the place to find us. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Joe Coleman on LinkedIn. If you're hearing this, I probably have some mutual connections with you. I'm sure I'm easy enough to find. St. Kolbe Studios is the place to go if you want a podcast, you want to build a podcast from the ground up. We offer a couple of packages to help you get started in anywhere from 6 to 10 weeks, depending on what you want to do, from 0 to a full podcast already out in the ether, all your gear, 6 to 10 weeks tops. If you have a current podcast, we offer a couple of options, monthly packages to run your podcast, upload everything, handle some of the marketing for you. It's a little more affordable than getting each episode edited individually, but if you want to do that too, we also offer some a la carte audio and video editing. Again, that is stkolbestudios.com. Or Joe at stkolbestudios.com. Send me an email, send me a DM on LinkedIn, go to our website. You can call us on our website. We've got a neat little feature where a phone will pop up and you can just call me. You'll get me wherever I am at the time, which has been fun. I always enjoy that. So that is the stkolbestudios.com. That's the place to find us.
So are you intentionally growing your beard out to look like St. Maximilian Kolbe?
I've only got a few more months. If I really commit to it, I think I can do it. I had I know a guy here in town who runs like a classical art studio, and he asked me if I'd model for a commission he's doing of St. Edward the Confessor because of the beard, which was I looked him up because I know the name, but I didn't know what it looked like, and I was very flattered. The guy has a good beard. He looks cool. But yeah, one day, maybe over the winter, I'll really grow it out, see if I can get the full Kolbe look.
I really appreciate talking to you. I'm very impressed with how clearly you speak.
Thank you. I have to do it for a living, so I try my best.
Great. Well, all the best to you.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate your time.